So one of the other things we got from lockdown wasn't something brand new, but it kind of really hammered home the usefulness of a tried and tested teaching method, and that's flipped learning. Um, so the idea of getting students to acquire new content independently at home, and then lesson time is used more for working on skills, writing, deeper thinking, higher order concepts, that kind of thing. Um, and sort of in our department, we'd been doing that for years. But I think one of the things that we had hammered home over lockdown is just how useful a method it is for getting through literary texts, especially at GCSE. Um, GCSE Class Civ, there are some challenging texts in there, and a few of them I sort of wouldn't really feel comfortable getting students just to go away and read on their own. There's quite a lot of unfamiliar names and places, vocabulary, concepts in there. And so what we'd found is, especially in the early years of teaching the new specs, where we were sort of planning kind of week to week, and we didn't have time to produce things like flipped learning videos, we were spending a lot of time in class just sort of group reading. And because of the sheer weight of material there is to get through, this left us with very little time to work on the skills, to work on the deeper thinking. And so at the end of the day, our students kind of weren't as good at the analytical and evaluative stuff as they had been in previous years under the old specification. And over lockdown, because so many of our students couldn't join lessons live, we started recording little segments of the prescribed sources, as you can sort of see here as an example. When teaching war and warfare literature, we read from the literature textbook, literature source book, which is conveniently divided up into little chunks. So we recorded a video for every chunk and set a sort of a suitable amount of those for a lesson. And then whenever students got that done in the day was fine, as long as they got it ready for the next lesson. Since we've come back into the classroom, though, we've continued using these videos and just set them as independent work. We still do a little bit of class reading, but the majority of what they read they do with a guided video. So a member of our department essentially reads it to them and pauses at points to explain the effectiveness of a simile or how this relates to one of our key concepts. Another thing that's quite nice as well is you can ask students questions like you would in class and prompt students to pause the video, write down a couple of ideas, and then press play. And then they can, you the teacher can sort of say, I'm sure you've got loads of great ideas. I can't wait to hear them in class. Here's one or two things that I thought. And so you're not really missing out on too much of that interactivity by doing this. And then what you gain is loads of interactivity in class, because you can put the stuff that you've read into practice as soon as they come back. One of the big issues we had when we started doing this initially was the fact that it was difficult to track who had done it and who hadn't done it. Of course, you ask, and then everyone says, "Oh yeah, I have," and then you come to talk about it, and it's very clear that some of them really haven't. So what we started doing was setting up a little Google quiz for every one, just a little 3-question quiz. Some of them based on what happens, maybe one question based on something that you, the teacher, have said during the video, to make sure they're not just kind of going and kind of Googling the answers, but they actually have watched your video. And if the chunks are short, say, a 10-15 minute video, you maybe set 2 or 3 of those as a week's homework. They just answer these 2 or 3 quizzes to make sure that they've actually done them. And this shouldn't add anything at all to your marking load, because you can set up a self-grading Google form. If you use Google Classroom as well, another really nice thing that you can do here is set it up as a self-grading form that then imports into your markbook. So you can just, with a click of a button, see who's got 3 out of 3, obviously paid a lot of attention, who's got 2 out of 3, watched it seems, but didn't pay that close attention, and has anybody completely missed the plot. so you can intervene with them later. I won't in this video go over the step-by-step of how to set up a self-grading Google form, because there's lots and lots of really excellent step-by-step guides with videos out there for you already. But here are a couple of bits of advice for making it work in our context. So there's lots of different types of question. There's short response, where students will type in an answer. Longer response, where you expect them to write a paragraph. Checkboxes. I don't think any of those are good for a self-grading Google form. The issue with short answers or long answers is when it marks it, what the student enters needs to be identical to what you put in the answer key. So if a student slightly misspells something, or if they don't capitalize it properly, then they get it down as incorrect, even though they might have gotten the mark if you had manually marked it. And checkbox style questions, where it's a mark all that apply, I'd also recommend not doing that, because say you've got 10 options and 5 are correct. If they get 4 correct, well, they've not gotten it exactly right, and so the form won't give them any points at all for what they did get right there. So I recommend, if you're going to use this just as a quick comprehension check to make sure they have done this viewing in advance of your lesson, just do multiple choice. Set up the multiple choice questions and just have one correct answer in each of those. Another useful feature when you're setting up one of these self-grading Google forms is you can set it up to give feedback to the student immediately. So after they have finished the quiz, they can see what they got right and what they got wrong. And after every question, if you've got time to do this, you can put in a little bit of feedback. So maybe explain just in a sentence or two why the correct answer was the correct answer. You can do that in writing, or you can even attach a link to a YouTube video if you want to do a more in-depth explanation or discussion of the correct answer to the question, or to pick up any misconceptions that you're expecting from any of those answers if you've made it particularly tricky. And then I mentioned this earlier on, if you do use Google Classroom and you've got your mark book on there, if you set up a Google form properly, then you can just click import grades and it will show you who's completed it, who's not completed it, and what marks they got. So all in all, a really nice, easy way, once you've put in the initial effort of getting it set up, of making sure that students are doing their flipped learning so that they can come to your class ready to discuss all of that lovely literature that they now hopefully understand.